Hey guys, it's Mrs. Bowerman Engel again. I'm making another podcast for cell structure and function to help you guys review for the upcoming test. And of course, it will happen on the day that we return to school once it stops being icy. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so cell theory will not be on this exam because we already tested over it during ecology, but it will be on your final exam, so I thought I would cover it one more time. Okay, so there's three main parts to the modern cell theory, but pretty much this is the basic one. So all living things are made of cells. Cells are the basic unit of structure and function in living things. They're also considered the smallest unit of life or living things. And then all cells come from pre-existing cells. If you have any questions on any of that to review for your final, please email me and I'll answer anything that I can, okay? And hopefully I'll see you guys again before the final. Okay, so what is a cell? A cell is just the smallest unit of life. That's how it's categorized. That's how it is in the hierarchy of life. It has to be able to perform life functions, which are like metabolizing, growing, reproducing, all of those 8 or 9 things that we talked about during ecology. Okay, so we've gone over this before. You guys have a copy of this. Examples of cells, you've got your amoeba proteus, your plant stem, bacteria, red blood cells, nerve cells. There's all kinds of cells. These are just a couple examples, and we'll go into detail on 1 or 2 of these here in a minute. Okay, so there's 2 main types of cells. You've got your prokaryotic cells and your eukaryotic cells. Now your prokaryotic cells, those are the ones without a nucleus. They have no nucleus whatsoever. And then, of course, eukaryotic cells right here. This is you and plants and all of that. This is multicellular organisms that have a nucleus and have membrane-bound organelles, which means that their organelles are surrounded by membranes. And prokaryotic, though they have cellular structures, are not considered membranes. So let's get into it. Here's a picture of a prokaryote. If you'll look at the picture, let's look at it. In the center where this reddish pink stuff is, that's what they call the nucleoid region. That is the genetic information for bacteria cells and all prokaryotes. It is not in a nucleus, okay? So this is not a nucleus. It's just free floating here throughout the cell. They generally draw it in the center of the cell, but it is not contained to the center of the cell. It can move about and float around in that cytoplasm. Let's look at some other things. If you see these dots, like all of these dots here, those are ribosomes, right? And remember that ribosomes make proteins. All cells have ribosomes. Let's see, what else? Okay, let's start on the outside. We have the capsule. Okay, which is just the outermost shell of the bacteria cell. It's there for protection. And then inside of that we'll have the cell wall. And you guys are familiar with the cell wall as it exists in plant cells. It's there for structure and also for protection. And then here we are with the cell membrane. All living things have a cell membrane. And once again, it works similarly to how ours works in the sense that it allows some materials in and some materials out, but it is not constructed always in the same way. Okay, and then we look at these crazy army leg tail things that are just flipping out everywhere. Those are flagella, and those are just tails. They extend out for movement in water or any aqueous solution. That's what they're for. Sometimes animal cells can also have a flagellum, though it's much more typical to see in prokaryotes, which are bacteria cells. These can be single-celled organisms, okay? So while you're looking at this picture, it's one cell, but this one cell could be an organism, like an entire organism, right? Whereas you are made up of trillions and trillions of cells. So this one cell is a living thing. If you look, just the prokaryotic cells are typically simple in structure. They don't have any membrane-bound organelles. There's not a lot of moving parts going on there. They're pretty simple. Eukaryotes tend to be much more complex. Speaking of which, here we are. Okay, so eukaryotic cells, as we've discussed, they have organelles. Organelles that are surrounded by membranes. This constitutes almost all living things that you are familiar with. So on our left here, we have our plant cell. And then on the right, we have our animal cell. I want you to note that this animal picture has a flagellum or a tail, just like the bacteria cell does. It helps some animal cells move through those aqueous solutions, those watery solutions. Okay, so let's look at it. In a plant cell, of course, we have our nucleus, which is characteristic of eukaryotes. We have a central vacuole here, that big lake-looking thing right there. And then, of course, we have endoplasmic reticulum, both the rough ER and the smooth ER. We have our Golgi apparatus, our mitochondria, our lysosomes, which are like our garbage men, chloroplasts to perform photosynthesis, a cell membrane, and a cell wall. This is one thing that plants and bacteria share, is that they both have a cell wall. Okay, and then if we're looking over here at the animal cell, we have some cytoskeletons, which are responsible for movement. They make microtubules, or microtubules make up the cytoskeleton. They help with the tail and moving around. So once again, we have mitochondria, lysosomes, cell membrane, nucleus, centrioles, all of that good stuff. If you get down here to where it says cilia, cilia are just hair-like structures. You don't have to worry about that on your test, okay? Of course, your Golgi apparatus. So let's move on and get into it. Here's another illustration of an animal cell with all of the parts that we've already discussed. No, everything looks normal as usual. You can tell they're much more complicated than prokaryotic cells. Here's a typical plant cell. Plant cells are drawn usually in a rectangle or in some sort of, if I can go back, or in some sort of like hexagonal or any sort of rigid shape. It will always have sharp angles if it's in that shape. Okay, let's see if there's anything we haven't really discussed. Don't worry about the crystals. We're not going to get into them in this unit, okay? Okay, so organelles. So we've talked in great detail about the membrane, and if you go to my podcast on cell transport, I go into more detail about the cell membrane there. All I need you to know right now is that it's semi-permeable, which means it lets some stuff in and some stuff out. It's made up of a phospholipid bilayer, meaning it has 2 layers of phospholipids. And go to the other podcast if you need more information on that. Cell walls are there for protection, found in plants and bacteria. Moving inside, your nucleus directs all cell activity, contains your DNA. It's the boss. It has its own membrane, and it has a nucleolus inside it. We won't go into detail about that. Membrane, we don't need to really know. Don't need to know that right now. Cytoplasm is just the jelly that fills up your cells. Here we go, the ER. Okay, so the ER moves things around in your cells. It has the smooth, which it looks like the surface would be smooth, and then it has the rough ER, which kind of looks like it has sprinkles on its surface. Those are ribosomes, okay, that helps with protein secretion. Ribosomes, their main job is to make proteins. That's pretty much it. They can be found free-floating throughout the cell, or they can be found on the rough ER. Mitochondria, perform cellular respiration, breaks down glucose into energy your cell can use. We've talked about this at great length. We went through cell resp in the previous unit. If you have any questions on this still, please feel free to email me. Okay, Golgi bodies. This is like our UPS. It packages and it ships and it moves things around throughout the cell. Typically it does protein packaging, but pretty much if it's packaging, sorting, modifying, all of that, it's your Golgi body or your Golgi apparatus. Lysosomes, these are your garbage men. They have special digestive enzymes to help break things down. If we didn't have lysosomes, our cells would explode and fill with waste, so we obviously need these things. Vacuoles. Okay, so vacuoles in plants store a lot of water and nutrients there. Some animals can have vacuoles, but typically found in plants. Chloroplasts, once again, they perform photosynthesis, which we talked about at great great length in the previous unit. If you have any questions on this, so please feel free to email me. Okay, that looks like that's the end of the slideshow for organelles. If you have any questions on organelles, please feel free to email me or look up Bozeman biology. We watch it sometimes in class, or you can look up crash courses if you're familiar with that on YouTube. Watch again for another podcast on the hierarchy of life. Thanks, guys. Bye.